Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nikita Udwani, and welcome to our webinar today on how good is your fleet acquisition plan. Yay, I see already some colleagues can hear me. Cerise, lovely to see you here. Well, not even see or hear, but at least see your message. Thank you all for joining. If this is your first Fleet Forum webinar, then maybe a few housekeeping rules. We try to make it, I don't have the privilege and the pleasure of seeing your faces and hearing your voices, but we want to try to still make it as interactive and fun in when you participate in a live webinar. So please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself, your name, the organization, and the country which you are calling in from today. This is a 30-minute webinar. It is recorded. It's actually not the first time we talk about this topic. I think it's the second time. We talked about it last year, and it was quite popular and in demand. So we've decided to repeat it today with some slightly new messages. So that's what I'm going to be talking about for the next 30 minutes. We have planned some time for questions, so please use the chat box throughout the in Nigeria. There we go. Please use the chat box to raise any questions. But also, I know many of you. I know you are also experienced fleet managers. You probably have your own ideas and thoughts that you also want to share on this. So please feel free to use the chat box. I have one eye on it, and I'm going to monitor it and also pick up and respond throughout the webinar. Maybe a little bit of a heads up. I'm a bit fluey. I apologize for that. It will be fine, but in case every now and then you see me muting myself, my sincere apologies. Alrighty, so let's start, right? So why this topic? How good is your fleet acquisition plan? Let me ask you a question. Aside from seeing my beautiful face today, why have you decided to attend this webinar? Can you share in the chat box? Is there something you wanted to learn or you wanted to hear? Is there a challenge that you're experiencing? Please feel free to use the chat box. In the meantime, let me tell you a little bit why I chose for this this topic today, right? So when talking to fleet managers, and through our trainings, but also through our summit. For those of you who had heard about it last week, I many times I hear, I'm buying the vehicle, fleet acquisition for me. What am I doing? I'm buying the vehicles the programs are asking me to buy, or I'm just renting the same vehicles over and over, right? At least that's usually what I hear from most of our fleet managers. And we've just last year we put this topic on the agenda for a number of reasons. One, we see more and more our fleet managers. This is a very costly exercise, right? If you don't have a proper plan for your vehicle acquisition, it can end up costing you a lot more, which means you're making your program activities more expensive and inefficient because there's less money going directly to the people who needed the valuable assistance of your organizational activities. But also it builds up frustration between staff members from the logistics, from the fleet side, and the program managers. We should be partners and supporters to our program managers, right? But often when the vehicle is taking time to arrive, when we're not able to provide good quality vehicles, this also becomes a bit of a friction point, or a little bit of a fight, I think I can call that. So this is why we really thought, okay, let's do a webinar on this topic last year, and I think it was well received. So today what we're going to be talking about is, what is vehicle acquisition? What type of vehicle should I consider? Where can I source my transport? Should I buy or should I rent? And what should I budget for fleet management? This is part of our basic fleet management webinar series. It's covering the minimum topics that you should know as a professional fleet manager. But of course, for those of you who are maybe interested in knowing a little bit more, I've tried to also combine it. Like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So let's start with the first part, which is what is fleet acquisition, right? So this is one of my favorite definitions. It was, I think our colleagues at MSI Reproductive Choices provided this, where it says acquisition is about value for money and the steps for increasing your fleet capacity, right? So if you think about it, you're probably closing off, if you are a calendar year type of organization, you are probably closing off the year, you're looking at new grants for next year, you're looking at acquiring the vehicles. I'm sure this will not come as a surprise to you, but let me share it just in case. You probably had no, I mean, actually, let me ask some of you. No, I have quite a number. I have 35 of you in the webinar today. I have a question for y'all. On average, how much time is it taking you to acquire a new vehicle? Let's say, for example, you try to acquire a vehicle on the 1st of November, which is today, right? How much time is it taking you to get this vehicle? I see some typing. 6 months. Okay, keep going. Let's hear some more colleagues. There's 35 of you on the line, huh? So I know you can, okay. Once, some 3 months, okay. Then we have Susan, say program time, keep on buying, went to a better option. Typically hand over to the National Society without any funds for 3 months, 4 months, 1 year, depending on the context, 3 months from, okay. So best case scenario, 1 year. Higher end of the scenario, 1 year, right? Indeed. So last year, I don't know, I have the feeling just from your answers that maybe the problem starts to become a little bit less. But last year, when we asked organizations this question, and this was in the time, please keep in mind, we were feeling the effects of the shortage of semiconductors, meaning then shortage of vehicles, all kinds of different things going on. So most people who I spoke to last year, I was hearing 9 to 12 months, right? The fact that many of you are saying 3 to 6 months, maybe potentially this is a sign that we are overcoming this shortage. But what I want to share with you is acquisition is a key part of the plan, do, check, adjust cycle. And it's in the P part, right? It's not easy to get vehicles from one day to another. It requires proper planning. And of course, in order for you to get most value for money from this process, you really need to make sure that you take your time and you plan this in advance. And when I say plan this in advance, what I mean is you should be getting involved right from the proposal writing stage. Let me give you an example, right? And because there's even more and more push, there's an increasing shift in the donor landscape that we see. So here what I've done is showed you an example of the requirements from ECHO. And there's a specific part in their environmental requirements where they are asking organizations to select fuel efficient vehicles, the right type of vehicle for the right job, right? And to consider low emitting and fuel efficient vehicles. So going back to acquisition, it's very important that already when we are writing a project proposal, that we have a good idea of how many vehicles do we need, what types of vehicles would we need to conduct these activities, and to make sure that the budget that we are seeking allows us to get the right type of vehicles for the right job, right? So many of you fleet managers, if you are saying to me today, Nikita, but my program colleagues only tell me when the funding comes in, and I'm going to tell you this is a good opportunity for you to start thinking, how am I going to challenge my program managers to say, I want to be your partner in this. I will help you write a stronger logistics part of the proposal, fleet part of the proposal, because I'll be able to be more, I can help you make a good estimate of what would be the exact amount of resources we would need to deliver these activities, right? So it's important, the earlier you start in the process from the proposal writing stage, the more likely it is for you to have a good justification to the donors, to have the right amount of resources, and show that you are a professional organization, right? Now let's look maybe with Also, what is the purpose of the transport, right? So what I mean with this is, what types of vehicles should we look at? I want to show you an example over here. This is we actually used this with one of our, well, recently actually with one of our NGO members, and last year with another UN agency that we were doing some consultancy work for, in helping them develop their fleet policies. Please remember, when you are starting to acquire vehicles, you don't start by saying, I want the Toyota Land Cruiser or I want the Duster. We take what, I'm not saying, no disrespect or anything negative towards these brands or towards these models, but what's important is that when you are in the fleet acquisition stage, even if you are a very professional fleet manager with many years of experience and you think, hey, I already know exactly which models, I would still encourage you to first start with the purpose of the transport. Why do I need this? What are the types of vehicles that I need, and what is the purpose? And that should be driven by what is the purpose of these vehicles, right? And I'm going to give you an example of this. So maybe you've seen this poster before. If you have, do let me know. It's also good feedback for us. ICRC developed this, I think, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they showed it also last week to many global fleet managers in the fleet member community, because what they were showing an example of a fleet optimization project they are running. They have a vehicle catalog in their organization, and their fleet managers in every country, in every region, they play a key role in determining what types of vehicles are needed for their programmatic activities. And instead of starting with, I want the Land Cruiser, or I want the city car or the Duster or the electric vehicle, they first look at their three priorities which they are trying to balance, which is costs, environment, safety. And they are looking at, okay, from a cost perspective, how much is this vehicle going to cost us? What is the environmental impact of this vehicle, and what is the safety rating? And the vehicles on the right hand side, they are using for their urban context, meaning where there's paved roads, there's tarmac, and the vehicles that are on the left hand side is what they are using much more for their off-road purpose. So this is an example I wanted to share with you, because I think it's really cool that ICRC in this case is really working, the fleet managers are really focusing on not automatically jumping to, I need a Land Cruiser because I need a Land Cruiser or a Duster or electric vehicle, but they are thinking first, okay, no, I have so many activities in 2024, I will need so many vehicles of this type, of that type, and then they are zooming into, okay, then what is in the vehicle catalog of my organization and what is available for acquisition, right? Colleagues, in case you have any tips or suggestions also on how you are doing it in your organization, please let me know. I'm really curious to hear. Recently, also, we did a webinar internally with one of our member organizations to really look at what is the environmental criteria that they're using in their tenders, right? And to think about how can they really look more and more on the environment and focus on how to give that weight in their tenders. So this is an ongoing active discussion in the member community. I'm curious to hear what you think about it, and what I'd like you for now to stay focused on is, in the acquisition process, please make sure that you look at these different priorities and you don't start with the specifications. Now let's maybe look next at what are the sourcing methods. So here today, what I'm going to be, there are potentially more methods, right? But I'll focus on some, in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on these and then look maybe at some of the pros and cons of each of these. I think normally when we want to acquire transport, we're usually thinking of the ones in blue, which is I have my own drivers, they're on the payroll, and either I buy a vehicle or I rent. But actually, there's many other more ways to acquire transport. Acquiring transport doesn't mean buying a vehicle. It doesn't mean owning a vehicle. There's different methods that you can look at, right? And so these are the ones that there's different sourcing methods. And I'm going to look with you today at these specific ones. We'll start with the ones that I think are familiar to most of you, which is own vehicle, own driver, right? And what are the key advantages here? Well, I think this you're well aware of. If it's your own vehicle and it's your own driver, you have full control. It's fully at your disposition. I think I saw Susan say earlier, we are buying them. Yes, when we you know we are our programs are keen on buying, and then when we buy them, then afterwards at the end of the program, we would typically hand it over, right, to a national society. And I appreciate, Susan, that you're asking yourself questions also on, through your comments I read also you saying, this is a challenge because we give it and then they don't have the funds to maintain the vehicles. Indeed, right? So our classic method, or our traditional method, our historical method has been, we have drivers on the payroll, we go and we buy the vehicle. Challenge with this is that then we also have to take care of the maintenance, of the insurance, and it's a very rigid, like inflexible. It's not, if today your programmatic activities are significantly reducing because you lost funding, or like we had with COVID, right, where some of us had to pause our activities for a few weeks, a few months. It's not easy to downsize, right? And then you have the costs. If you've been attending our TCO webinars, then you know that the costs, even when those vehicles are standing still, it's still costing your organization money, right? So it's not easy to downsize. Another method that we see organizations more and more considering, which is, okay, I have my own vehicle, but I will ask my program staff to drive the vehicles. So if they have a meeting in, let's say, a field office, okay, they can drive, they can leave the vehicle there, they'll have their meeting, and then they'll drive back, right? So similar here also, you have full control. Key benefit over here is that there's reduced cost of this, because you don't have to pay for a professional driver. But I think the main downsides here, and those of you who are using this method, please feel free to share, right? But I think where I hear fleet managers complain most about this is where they say, my staff, when they are not professional drivers, they are not driving safely, or they are not taking care of the vehicle properly, or they are not or maybe they are not complying with the safety regulations, they are speeding, all different types of here we talk about rented vehicles and own drivers. I'll not spend too much time on this one. Oh, sorry. I will not spend too much time on this one, but that's because I think you're familiar with this one, which is our own driver on the payroll, and we use a rental vehicle, right? I think I see this becoming more and more the predominant method, acquisition method, especially in NGOs with short-term grants of 6 months, 8, 9 months, a year, that they are increasingly relying on rentals, right? And there are benefits to this. It gives us speed to respond to emergencies, to quickly get to quickly have access to transport. It's elastic. As soon as the program is done, please take back your vehicle. Even during the specific program, if you probably have spikes of activities, you can really, you don't have to take the vehicle for the full duration of the program. So there's a lot of advantages to it. But the other side of it is rental vehicles. Okay, we don't have to do the maintenance and the insurance, but we are still responsible for this. Our staff are going to be moving in a vehicle that we don't have full control over. This is not a bad thing, but it does mean that you need to have very strong control mechanisms. And I see the reality is, in this sector, in practice, many times we have not been taking vehicle rentals seriously. In the last 6 months, I've heard at least 3 Fleet Forum member organizations saying, I'm currently working on rewriting my vehicle rental guidelines. And it's not because it's not because they don't have any guidelines, but because they are seeing instances in their organizations where this is not going very smoothly, and they are looking at ways to professionalize and improve the guidelines. Yeah. Let's continue now with some of the more newer methods, right? Third-party transport. I think, Owen, you mentioned this, leasing and transport contractors. Yep. So third-party transport can also be a way to work on this. This is where it's a rental driver, it's a rental a vehicle. You're not paying for the vehicle, but you are paying specifically for transporting people from point A to point B. This can also be for goods sometimes. It's similar to the rental vehicles, quick to acquire. You have reduced management efforts. And just like the rentals, you have less control over the fleet capacity, but it's still your organizational activities. It's still your staff members in there. So you have a duty of care that you need to manage, right? Without having full control. So that's a key disadvantage of this acquisition method. Taxis. I know this sounds silly, but I see this more and more. Taxis. I see also in Lebanon, for example, we see a little bit more like e-bikes. It's very, very early start of it. The taxi is more common. And perhaps the e-bike is not exactly a great example here, but what I wanted to emphasize with the taxis is that this is about paying only for the usage. I'm taking a trip from point A to point B. I pay for this. This can be very effective in city environments where maybe there are plenty of taxi companies. There's a good market. You can tender. You can get good quality, reputable companies with that are not operating old vehicles, that have the right safety features. I think the key thing that over here is that it may not be available at all times, right? But even that you can sort of negotiate with if you put it in your tender and you offer like a higher price for that. You will most likely find this, right? And I see we all have a sense of humor as well in the meetup. So he says, do we have to choose the taxi as per the environmental criteria? Maybe if it's a hybrid. No, I'm joking. But it's something to think about, like, I'll be honest, I'm tangenting off a little bit, but I think the first time while doing activities for Fleet Forum, where I think it was right before the pandemic, in 2020, early 2020, I was in Jordan, going to the hotel to stay the night over and start facilitating a training that was funded by USAID. Thank you, by the way. And I hopped into a hybrid taxi. So, and I think at the time I didn't know many member organizations who had hybrid vehicles, but yes, there were already hybrid taxis in the country, right? So it could also be from an environmental perspective. And let's look at the last one. This is a little bit controversial, but colleagues, this is a very one that is really key to our environmental strategies, right? Which is vehicle sharing with other organizations. Lots of positive benefits here. Sector collaboration. You can share the cost. You can recover the cost of your own fleet if you have extra capacity. I think the key thing over here is that it's a very politically sensitive. Sometimes we all have big egos about it's my vehicle. Then we also have concerns on how are we going to share the cost. It really requires strong collaboration and will to share with each other. And to be fair to each other, to not be so focused on, but it's my vehicle, but to have that genuine will to reduce our environmental footprint. So vehicle sharing with other organizations, we're starting to see good examples of this with UN agencies, with NGOs in Lebanon. We're starting a new project in Central African Republic on vehicle sharing. And I see several of our Fleet Forum members last week also made commitments to having to share vehicles with other organizations. I think, Owen, you said we are thinking as a HCV supplier, the open use to others is a good idea for cost. There we go. So So I'm seeing I'm running a little bit out of time, so I will go a little bit Speedy Gonzalez because I would also like to answer some of your questions. I think the key, no matter which option you use, what I think is important to consider is look at the different risks associated with this, right? So the vehicle needs to think about the operational impact. The vehicles must be safe. Think about the driver, the skill level, their fitness to drive, their trustworthiness. You need to look at the financial implications. Think about the liability, right? The legal implications. And also don't forget to think about the reputational impact of this. So no matter, I just wanted to make you sort of think, oh, we don't always have to own our own vehicles. What are the other options? I hope I gave you some ideas to consider. Jupiter, you mentioned staff using their personal vehicles for official duties and paid for requested trips at an agreed a flat rate. We are exploring this option. Interesting. I know CRS just the other way around. Sometimes they have official vehicles which staff are allowed to use for personal use, and they're currently revising their policy around this to see what would be an appropriate rate, as I understand. And they're doing a benchmarking with different organizations. So different from what you're saying, Jupiter, which this is about personal use for official duties. Theirs is about official vehicles for personal use. But yes, they are looking at how, they're trying to benchmark with others and seeing what is the way to go about it. I think my last message to you all before I take a couple of questions is, please remember, one size doesn't fit all. About a year ago, I think it was a year ago, we did a webinar together with OSCE where we developed a cost optimization tool. And what was really impressive to see in that tool is that we put in some data from the operation based on the number of trips, the concurrency of trips. And what we saw over there is that often for short trips, one specific type of acquisition method was preferable, whereas for long trips, there was a different type of acquisition method. So what I say with this also is we've talked about 6 methods today. There are probably some more as well, but you have to be nuanced in your approach. Don't think only it should be one method for my full operation. Really, you have to look at the data, look at the context. Where is the spread of your vehicles, where are most of your activities taking place, and really look at what are the available options in terms of acquisition methods. Yeah. I'm going to pause for a second and take a sip of water, and in the meantime, I'm going to check if you'll have any questions. I have not seen any questions as yet. I've seen lots of comments, lots of ideas, but no questions. Are there any questions? I'm going to give you a few seconds to type in the chat box. Oh, sorry, that's sweet of you. Thank you. I see some colleagues are typing. Type. Please type. I would love to hear your questions. No questions. Oh. Superb. I'm not seeing any questions. I'm at least happy to hear I gave you some good ideas and some food for thought. I know it's not always the easiest, right? But if you are currently re-examining the acquisition methods for your operation, please feel free to drop me an email. More than happy to introduce you to the cost optimization tool we developed for OSCE. You need to have some data for it, of course. But it's a good way for you to start really looking at your data. And I think you'll be surprised to see what comes out of it, right? In terms of the best acquisition methods for your own operation. So if there is something if you need some support with that, feel free to reach out. I see there are no more questions. There was a previous remark on, can you send me the slides? Yes, we can send the webinar recording, not a problem. And we can attach the slides as well. I want to thank you all for joining today, for being great participants, for sharing your comments and your thoughts, and of course, introducing yourself as well. Next week, we will be having a webinar from Fleet Forum member TSS. Experts in run flats and all different types of parts related to armored vehicles. So I'm sure they will also have some interesting messages to share with you. So hopefully I will see you next week, and have a great week. We'll speak soon. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time. Have a great day. Bye bye.